Thou hast no right but to do thy will. Do that, and no other shall say nay.
Welcome to the Dark Ascent podcast, where we illuminate the path to discovering your true will. This is episode 19. Does religion have a place? To learn more about our work, please visit darkascent.org. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Hi everyone, welcome to our podcast. I am your host Melik Toth, and I am here with my wife Eleonora.
Hello everyone.
And today we have, I think, what will be a very interesting topic. I hope it will be a very interesting topic, and it's one that I think a lot of people don't really talk about too much, especially in the New Age community, sometimes not even in the occult community. People don't really discuss this too much, and that is religion. You know, a lot of people have this sort of immediate dismissal of religion.
And it kind of, I think, is a trigger word, too.
Yeah,
for some
I think
people.
So. Religion is bad. Organized religion. Especially those two words together. Organized religion is just, because a lot of people were hurt by it or kind of getting away from it, maybe grew up in that context and so had a lot of bad experience with it. And so religion is sort of one of those words, kind of like God. You say God and people sort of cringe a little bit, or similar religious words like that. I know one word that I don't like is Lord. Actually, I was interested because I was just listening to someone else recently in the law of attraction space who said that she also didn't like the word Lord because it triggered her.
And it's all over Thelema.
It is all over Thelema, so it's one of those things you have to get used to. But, religion is something similar where a lot of people don't like it and have a negative concept of it. But does it have a place in spirituality and magic for those maybe practicing the law of attraction? Does it have a place? And this will also be the podcast where I want to share a recent experience we had.
Yes.
Based around this whole thing. So that's going to be our topic today. I'm pretty excited about it.
Me too.
So getting started, I've discussed this a handful of times, and I'm going to give the brief background about it again. But, I've done the law of attraction for quite a while, and, it'll be 4 years at the end of this month that I really started getting into the law of attraction, and I started my website, which used to be Co-Creation Coaching and is now Dark Ascent. And so, I learned quite a bit about it, but almost immediately, but especially as time went on, I had a sense that there was a deeper mystery that I was missing.
I think you've always had that sense, even ever since you were little.
Oh yeah, definitely. And, in the law of attraction, it's all based on desire, and it can be very spiritual because it's not just, I used to think it was just ego fulfillment. It's not that. Some people do it that way, but mostly it really is a spiritual thing, or it can be, because you do have to kind of let go of your attachments in order to get your desires. It can't be something you need or something you crave or whatever. It has to be more of a joyful creation, and that requires some real inner work that I think a lot of people pass over. But even with that understanding in place, and I've known that almost since the beginning, to one degree or another, but even with that in place, there was still a sense that there was something sort of missing. Now, the first incarnation this took for me was, if anyone has been around my site long enough, I think maybe 1 or 2 people have been. Do you know where I'm going with it? Because you started chuckling. I thought maybe you did.
Well, I didn't know if you're talking about when you're really little.
No. But after the law of attraction.
Oh, Islam?
Yeah. So, okay. So
I wasn't sure. Sorry.
And it was all Eleanor's fault. I won't go into detail, but you
can blame me all you want.
I was realizing that surrender is the key to manifestation. Like surrender, I was talking all about surrender. That was sort of at the core of what I was teaching. This is back in
2016.
End of 2015.
Yes.
Yeah, and into 2016. And at the time I was working on learning languages. I was learning French at the time, and just sort of interested in different cultures. And I came across like Arabic, and I was really fascinated by the culture, because to them, like, God is sort of the center of everything. Like, they mention God. It's built into the language. You can't really learn Arabic without speaking a lot about God, or that being a really big part of what you're seeing. And I realized I had learned that the word Islam actually means surrender, or submission, or surrender, and I was really intrigued by that. So we kind of had this 3-month period where we really deeply explored it and checked it out, and really met a lot of amazing people locally where we were at the time.
We did everything. We did the prayers.
Oh yeah.
We ate halal food or meat.
Yep.
We did it all.
Yeah, so it was really interesting. It was too strict in the end, and I think that is why people don't like the word religion, is because it brings up this idea of structure, or like overly structured, being really strict, being really moral, having this really strict sense of morality and things like that. And that definitely had that. It was like it ticked off that box of mystery, but also added on a whole bunch of guilt. And so after a few months, I'm like, that's not it.
And I grew up Catholic, so I understand religion with the guilt, and it's a really bad thing.
So, I mean, it was a really good experience otherwise, but
yeah,
it was not good.
I would never take it back, because I learned a lot about myself. Yeah. I went around in public wearing hijab. That was interesting.
Yeah, that was really interesting. It was fun.
What I learned is that I prefer to do that than wear a hat in the winter. That's the one thing I learned.
So that was the first incarnation, but there's a lot of other things that happened, and because Eleonora was Catholic, I checked that out a few times. And then, of course, magic, and I checked out Wicca a couple times, Hinduism a couple times, just different things over the years. And nothing really hit the spot quite what I needed, or what I was looking for. Wicca was interesting. That was kind of the first thing I did as a child, when I was about 9 years old, when I really first got started on this journey. But to me, I've discussed this a little bit before, it's too manufactured. People say it's a continuation of ancient traditions, and it's really, really not. And it's Gerald Gardner, who founded Wicca, kind of ripped off a lot from Aleister Crowley, whom I will talk about soon. And so there's not much original, in my opinion. Sorry, Wiccans, if anyone listening. I don't mean to offend you. If it's your thing, it's your thing. But not much original about Wicca. Then it didn't really speak to me. When I was younger, it was really interesting, and I was really curious. But as I grew up and learned more about different things out there, it was just sort of, to me, a copycat.
And I feel like it's really rare that people stay Wiccan. I have a friend that did, but I think that's very rare.
Yeah.
Because usually you do it as a teenager, and then it kind of just,
Yeah, that's happened a lot. Or it's the sort of, I feel like people exiting Christianity now it can take a lot of different forms. So I feel like one of two religions are sort of their first stop. Well, maybe three if you count the New Age. But if they're going to be a religion, I wouldn't really count the New Age as that. It's more of a spiritual path. But one of two religions are generally people's first path outside of Christianity, and it depends on how dark they feel like being. Either going to take the light and fluffy path and be Wiccan, or they're going to take the dark path and be satanic. And it just kind of depends, and they both have their own value and whatnot. But a lot of people have said, they did that for a while and then moved on. Even in Satanism, and I mean LaVeyan Satanism. I mean, lots of people have different forms of Satanism, but LaVeyan Satanism is very rebellious, antinomian in how it sees things, and so it's very cathartic for people who are getting out of Christianity. So I've heard of a lot of people who stuck around in that for a while and then moved on to something else once they kind of got that out of their system.
Well, we have a friend, I think you know who I'm talking about, who read the Satanic Bible, but now she kind of does her own thing.
Yeah.
She's my age, so she's 29.
Yep.
And I don't know if she'd call herself a Satanist necessarily, but she kind of takes some of those elements and other ones, and
just depends. But so I find people take one of those two stops. But for me, what I always found interesting was I was always drawn to Thelema, and I've been talking about Thelema the last few podcasts, so you can go to those, I think, episodes 17 and 18. Yeah. I've been talking about Thelema at least. So, kind of have an introduction
Even
to what that is.
16 maybe. I don't know.
I don't know. But I was always really drawn by Thelema. In the past, I never really had a way of going deep with it, and I've said that before. But this time around, we found a local body, well, relatively local, like 80 miles away, but better than most things. But a local body that is really awesome to hang out with, and we go there, and I talked about, we went to the Gnostic Mass, and that was a lot of fun. So, Thelema for me has been kind of where it is, where it really works for me, and it works. And, I talked about this before, where at first I was a little self-conscious, because it's like, all these law of attraction people just sort of do law of attraction, and that's it. So why do I feel this deeper mystery that I keep searching for different expressions of it, for different ways of getting at that, and why can't I just do, spirituality or the law of attraction, or just, like what a lot of New Age people do, just float around from one thing to another another.
And you've done that.
I have done that, and it never was really that satisfying. It's you sort of just feel adrift, so to speak. And so
I think even the New Age sort of is turning into a religion too, though, in a way.
Yeah, but it doesn't have the elements.
No, it doesn't, but the way people treat it like holier than thou. There's so many people that are,
And so, interestingly, I talked about Crowley, and, he was obviously one of the most well-known and possibly infamous magicians of the 20th century. And he obviously started Thelema. Well, I think it was probably mostly involuntarily because of the Book of the Law, if you believe the origins of it, which I do. But he really embraced it. And I want to read, because he kind of seems to agree with what I say about this sense of mystery. And so I sort of want to read this little section. This is from his Confessions. He has a book called Confessions, and it's sort of his autobiography of sorts. And he writes a little blurb on religion and when he wrote the Gnostic Mass. He wrote the Gnostic Mass in, I want to say 1913.
15? No?
I think 13.
Was
I'm
it
not
13?
sure.
Okay.
And, for the OTO, the Ordo Templi Orientis. So he wrote the Gnostic Mass, and I was curious, why did he write it? Like, was it just sort of on a whim? Did he just do it for something to do? Or was there a deeper reason? So I looked it up a while ago, and I found this quote, and it really validated the feeling I've had for years, and I just thought it was really interesting. So let's see how I do with this quote. But again, this is from the Confessions. So he said, "While dealing with a subject, I may as well outline its scope completely. Human nature demands, in the case of most people, the satisfaction of the religious instinct, and, to very many, this may best be done by ceremonial means. I wish, therefore, to construct a ritual through which people might enter into ecstasy as they have always done under the influence of appropriate ritual. In recent years, there has been an increasing failure to attain this object because the established cults shock their intellectual convictions and outrage their common sense. Thus their minds criticize their enthusiasm. They are unable to consummate the union of their individual souls with a universal soul, as a bridegroom would be to consummate his marriage if his love were constantly reminded that its assumptions were intellectually absurd. I resolved that my ritual should celebrate the sublimity of the operation of universal forces without introducing disputable metaphysical theories. I would neither make nor imply any statement about nature which would not be endorsed by the most materialistic man of science. On the surface, this may sound difficult, but in practice, I found it perfectly simple to combine the most rigidly irrational conceptions of phenomena with the most exalted and enthusiastic celebration of their sublimity." Okay, long quote.
Maybe you should link to that quote.
I don't really have a link, but I can write out the quote, because I saw someone else quote it, so I don't really have the original link, but...
Oh, okay. Well, if it's gonna...
I can always quote it in the show notes, though.
That's true. Maybe you should, just because it's so long.
Yeah, so basically, what I get out of that is there is a religious instinct that people have.
That was so funny about marriage.
Yeah.
I almost laughed so hard.
I know, You know, it's like someone's trying to get married and it's like, oh, that's absurd. And, you know, trying to intellectualize it. And that's what a lot of occultists do. Exactly that. It's like intellectualize this mystical process. And
do they really? I guess.
it's very intellectual.
Yeah, it is. I don't like that. It's too much.
And what Crowley wanted to do, just to kind of summarize, was to create a ritual that, as he said, would satisfy the religious instinct through ritual, through ecstatic ritual, and yet do it in a way that wouldn't require a lot of faith and a lot of, especially blind faith, I think, from people. He really liked for his rituals and principles and whatnot to have a scientific basis of sorts, you know. And so, you know, he really wanted it to be for anyone that whether you believed in the whole spiritual stuff or not, you could still celebrate, as he said, the sublimity of these forces. And that's really what the Gnostic Mass was supposed to do.
It has, too.
So, for me, that really validated, you know, the sense of mystery that I was looking for, that I felt like was missing. Because, like I said, I was doing the law of attraction, and it was just sort of like, there's something deeper that's calling to me that I'm not satisfying. And where is that coming from? And it was sort of this irritating itch of sorts. Like, there's something calling to me. I don't know where it's coming from. And attending the Gnostic Mass has been a really interesting and intriguing experience, because it really satisfied that in a really deep way that really you wouldn't expect outside of traditional religion. You know, it's really shocking.
Oh my gosh. I was so scared at first because I thought it was going to be this play of sorts. Like, there's no energy being raised.
Right,
you know,
right, yeah.
Because I've seen people try to create ritual, but didn't really work.
Well, it's like, and again, I'm really good at insulting religions today, I'm sorry. But a while ago, by a while, I mean years, like this is back, 2016? We tried out a couple of times a Unitarian Universalist church.
I think it was even before the Muslim stage.
Yeah, I don't. Well, all I remember is doing a talk there about the law of attraction, so it must have been.
No, that was in 2015.
Oh, was it?
Yep. No, maybe you're right. You're right. It was 16.
Anyway,
it was right before the Muslim thing.
Yeah, you're right. It was. Okay, so you know we tried out this Unitarian church a couple of times, and again, if you're a Unitarian, it's your thing. Whatever. I mean, you know, do your will. But to me, the whole thing felt fake. It felt kind of forced. It felt just inauthentic, I guess. You know, the word I'm trying to think of isn't coming to me at the moment, but it didn't feel genuine.
Yeah, it felt like pretend.
Yeah. So, you know, that it was like they had these songs that were just sort of popular, like pop, like culture songs or patriotic songs, just really weird. And I don't know if ours did it like others do it or not. I mean,
I don't think so, because there was no real pastor.
Yeah, but there was nothing there for me. It was just a group of people doing something, and it never really, I didn't feel anything from it at all. So that didn't work. And I think the fear was, what if it's like that, where it's just a group of people doing this random thing and it just feels contrived is the word I wanted. Thank you. Contrived. It felt contrived.
Thank who?
Whoever inspired me. I don't know.
You just said thank you.
Because the word popped in my head, so I don't know. Someone sent it to me.
Good.
It felt contrived is what the Unitarian Church felt like. It felt contrived. And I was afraid this would feel like that. And, you know, it really, really didn't at all. And I was sitting there at first and like, oh God, this is going to feel so fake. But as I opened up to it, it really didn't.
And the thing is, it was so subtle because it snuck up on us, I felt like.
Yeah, it did.
Because at first, like, okay, what's going to happen here? And as it kept going, it was like, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those things, at least for me, it didn't hit till afterwards.
For me, it hit about halfway through, maybe 3/4 of the way
Well, I mean,
through,
it did for me too, but it really, like, my energy changed or something.
Yeah, afterwards.
It was like, wait a minute, what just happened?
Now, here is the big thing. is, and this has been weird to tell people. I almost feel like a bad New Ager or something, a bad LOA-er.
LOA-er.
Practitioner of the other way. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. Because after our first experience, we decided that, I mean, they literally have all the traditional, like, almost all traditional sacraments. And so the EGC, as I described last time, is the Ecclesia Gnostica Catholica. And it's the ecclesiastical arm of the Ordo Templi Orientis, which is a magic order. So I found the term. I remember last time I was saying the other arm of the OTO is something called the MMM. It's the Mysteria Mystica Maxima. So that's sort of where you get initiated, and it's this whole thing of initiation and secrets and whatnot, which I also plan on. I hope to do. I don't want to be presumptive, but I hope to do that as well.
We're going to go on that path too. Yeah.
But the EGC is the ecclesiastical arm, and you don't have to be a member of the OTO, of the MMM part of the OTO, to be in the EGC. And you can get baptized, you can get confirmed, the whole 9 yards. I mean, everything.
The only thing you can't really do is be a priest.
Yeah, without being in the OTO itself, initiated member of a certain degree.
Right.
And so, yeah, that sounds weird. Baptized, confirmed, like what on earth, you know? And I shared this on Facebook, like, yeah, we're getting baptized in the EGC. And it you know, now Eleonora's fear was her Christian friends finding out. My fear was, I'm going to sound so weird to my New Age friends. Like, they're going to be like, what are you getting into now?
Well, and you tagged me, and I swear nobody paid attention.
Yeah, probably not.
Ugh, I don't know why.
But so, you know, we decided to get baptized in this church, this EGC church. And it still sounds really weird to even say that, but the first experience was such a powerful thing. Baptism there is sort of a let's see how it goes sort of thing. It's not a permanent, you know, you're a member of the church or anything. Like, it's sort of, you're checking it out, and then if you really like it, then you can get it confirmed. So we decided to do that. And lucky for us, their next baptism ritual or ceremony was on May 21st. And so on a Tuesday.
Yep.
And so we obviously decided, hey, we have to do that, because they only do them a few times a year. So there was no way we were missing out. So I cajoled my mother into driving us on a Tuesday night. This is a whole adventure. I cajoled her into driving us. Actually, it wasn't that hard, surprisingly. But
an hour and a half to Pittsburgh.
An hour and a half. Yeah, we're an hour and a half away. So we left. I left work early that day. I left at 4 o'clock. And, you know, we got there around, she took a really long way. So we actually got there around 6:30.
It was perfect, though.
Drove through for dinner and just sort of took our time. Anyway, so get there around 6:30, and the ritual, the Gnostic Mass, the first one we went to, was really beautiful. It was amazing, and, you know, we didn't quite know what to do with it. It was really cool. The baptism was just another level entirely.
Yep.
And I think we both sort of felt it.
Yeah.
And so the cool thing was we were able to got baptized under our magical names. They asked us, what magical names do you want to use? And the fascinating thing was, and I won't go too much detail into this, but our magical names, you know, Melitov for me and Eleanor for her, were sort of something that weren't, you know, it wasn't that structured how we found it. It wasn't like this long drawn out process. It was sort of out of meditation. I actually came up with both of ours. I came up with mine. Eleanor was like, I want one. And
you got it like right away.
I was thought about it and like, oh, this sounds right for you. And she loved it. I didn't really look into the deeper meaning of what it meant or if it meant anything. It was just sort of something I felt inspired. So as, you know, and this was earlier this year. Before all this,
like way back,
January or February. And so they told us, hey, you can take a magical name if you want to. Some people do. You can take your given name if you prefer, but you can also take your magical name. And so immediately I'm like, okay, I'd rather take a magical name, but now I'm all self-conscious because my name doesn't really mean anything anywhere. It's just sort of something I received in meditation, but did I really receive it, or was it just made up? And a lot of people will use like Kabbalistic phrases or things that mean something and add it to some number and blah, blah, blah. And so I started doing some research on mine and used some, you know, in different languages, they have numbering systems where each letter is a number and you add them up to a certain value and it means certain things. And so I started doing that with my name and came up with a significant meaning. And then Eleanor was like, oh, that's, it was perfect for me too. I may as well just say it. So it adds up to 91, which has a lot of different meanings. But one of the cool things is that it's the value of the Hebrew letters Aleph, Mem, Nun, which is Amen. So it's sort of an expression of will. Like, this is done, this is so. It's will, when you will something. And like you're declaring it to be done. And I'm like, that is so perfect for me.
Yep.
So there are other meanings to that too, but I just loved that. And then so Eleanor said, well, you should look up mine. And so I was doing some research on hers. And so I played around with a few things and found out that in Hebrew, of course, English to Hebrew transliteration is always unpredictable, but in Hebrew, hers added up to 156, which is also the number of Babylon.
Which creeped me out.
So, and Babylon's a huge symbol for her. So it was like, we both had names that meant, when you looked into it, something significant that at the time I had no idea. I just received them.
Yeah, because actually we hadn't moved yet.
Oh yeah, so it was in December.
It was, at least. Because I remember where I was standing when you told me.
Yeah, so that was almost creepy. So, well, now we have to. I even did a tarot reading and everything about whether we should use our names or something else. And both readings said to use our original magical names. So we did. And, it really fit. It almost felt like our names were being confirmed somehow or justified or validated in a sense. Consecrated is the word I want. Almost being consecrated for our work. I don't know if it felt like that to you, but for me it sort of felt like that.
Yeah, I did, and I still do, because that name for me is, even just the sound of it, it feels very powerful, and I've never felt that way.
Yeah.
So for me, I was like, yeah, this is what I need to use.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that was really fascinating. And so we used our magical names and went through the baptism ceremony. So they did the baptism and then a Gnostic Mass afterwards. It was this about 3-hour process.
Yeah, it took a while.
And the baptism was just really magical. It was really a transcendent experience. It was really a transcendent experience for me. So...
And for me, because, I grew up Catholic, so usually Catholics are baptized as babies, so I don't remember it.
Right.
And I didn't have a choice in the matter.
Yeah.
I was just baptized, And so for me, I felt like my energy was raised up above everything that I've ever been through, Because, and I'll always respect where I came from. Mm-hmm. I don't have any bitterness to what happened or where I came from, because I needed it. I needed the experiences. But I've outgrown them now. And I feel like this baptism sort of, kind of, how do I explain it? It, elevated me above it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was...
And it was a reminder of, this is where you are now.
Yeah, it opened up the next door.
It really did. I felt like I was just elevated up and up and up.
Yeah. I remember afterwards sitting there and just feeling like, I feel like something was legitimately done to me. I feel different. I feel almost like some energy was laid upon me in some way, which remained with me for a while, that I felt that. It was just really a profound experience for both of us.
Like, it felt like it was fine-tuned. It felt like it was upgraded to me.
Mm-hmm. So, afterwards, I was sitting there and felt this energy. And, I'm pretty skeptical of things. So, for me to be moved by an experience is pretty rare. And
no, it's not pretty rare. It's extremely rare. He's downplaying it, okay? Very much.
Yes, it's extremely rare. I will question just about anything. And I haven't questioned this at all because it was such... It almost creeped me out because I was sitting there afterwards and literally felt, whether it was my HGA, Holy Guardian Angel, or whether... I don't know what it was, but I felt this energy over me almost like I was wrapped in this warm blanket or something is how I felt it.
Yeah.
And I was like, holy heck, what just happened? Something's different. Something is metaphysically different in me right now that I don't understand, and it's really weird because I'm used to this sort of very simplistic LOA understanding of, oh, well, it's just my vibration and whatever I think about I get and blah, blah, blah. No, this was a deep core level transformation that couldn't be explained. And it sort of creeped me out a little bit.
Right, and for me, it was more gradual. Like, yes, I did feel the energy and I felt all that, but every day I grow more and more sure of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very subtle and it's very slow.
Yeah.
But more and more, I'm realizing how I just need to shed everything old.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's really becoming such an urge. And I don't think that would have happened if I hadn't gone through the experience.
Right, yeah.
I know it wouldn't have.
Yeah. So it was a really interesting, it was a really profound experience, like I said. And then we had...
I'm kind of scared to know confirmational too.
I know.
I'm just like...
Yeah.
Whoa.
And we plan on doing that, so I'm helping Eleanor memorize the Gnostic Creed.
I'm getting there. It's getting easier, though, don't you notice?
It is getting easier.
For me?
Yeah. So we had the Gnostic Mass afterwards, and then we had a whole journey getting home. I mentioned a little bit last time where we got...
No, you didn't.
Yeah, I mentioned it because it was after we recorded the last podcast after that, where we got our car broke down and all sorts of not fun stuff.
Oh, I thought we recorded it before. Yeah, it was before the baptism.
Oh, I don't know. I thought I talked about it somewhere. Anyway, but maybe it was somewhere else I talked about it. But yeah, we had car broke down and we got stranded like 60 miles from home. And it was this whole stressful thing. It felt like an ordeal. You know what I mean? The Book of the Law talks a lot about ordeals. Okay, we just got baptized and now we have this ordeal going on. Like, we're stuck. And then got out of it, got home at like 3 a.m. It was pretty nuts, and then I had to work the next day.
You did, though.
I did. I don't know how I did it, but I did. I went an hour late, and my boss was understanding. I didn't exactly tell him, hey, I went to an OTO baptism yesterday, and I got home really, really late. I just told him I got stranded in Pittsburgh, and didn't get home till really late at night. But anyway, so it was a crazy experience. And I think the after effects have been felt since then for both of us. And, you know, we're preparing for the confirmation as well. And then also hoping for the initiation into the other part of the OTO as well. But it's just really fascinating. And so, again, for me, the whole thing was weird because religion is this word that no one really likes. And here I am getting baptized into this occult church of Thelema and having a really convincing experience. So it's been very different in that sense. But I did, you know, a lot of research afterwards about the nature of religion and why people have a need for it. And in fact, I found this really fascinating article about sacraments, actually. And so, because the EGC has almost all the sacraments except for confession, because, you know, there's really no idea of sin, obviously, in Thelema. I mean...
But they changed it.
They changed it, yeah. But everything else, you have baptism, you have confirmation, you have marriage, you have holy orders, because there are priests and priestesses. You have, you know, a rite for the sick, like when you're about to die. So... You know, you have pretty much everything you would have. Oh, and I did forget one. The
Eucharist.
Eucharist, which is...
That's pretty important.
That's pretty important. In the Gnostic Mass, they call it communication. It's these cakes of light and this wine. And, you know, it's not obviously in the same context at all as like in the Catholic Church or something. But it's still this really important thing, a ritual that you do.
I choked on the bread.
Oh my god, it was
on the
so
cake
hilarious.
of light.
Yes.
Oh, and you have to say something after you consume the bread and the cake of light and the wine.
Yes.
And I'm trying to choke this phrase out because I choked on the bread and the wine.
Yes.
And I'm just like, oh my gosh. I wasn't... Apparently it's pretty common, but oh my gosh.
Yeah, because they don't give you, you don't get a communal, a glass of wine or whatever, a chalice of wine that everyone sips from. No, everyone gets a full to the brim goblet of wine that either you have to chug or you're going to be there for a while. Like, you don't have to drink all of it.
I don't, because
I do, because I like to, but everyone gets a full goblet, so you're not just taking a little sip, you're drinking wine, so it's pretty funny. But anyway, so they have all the sacraments pretty much, and then confession, they don't have that because there's no conception of sin, but what they have instead is the reminder of doing your will. And so one example of that is like before a meal, it's called saying will, but you can also do it before activity. So basically reminding yourself, I'm doing this activity in alignment with my true will to accomplish the great work. The great work is discovering your true self and uniting with that, basically.
We're so bad at doing it with meals.
I know, we're still learning. It's a habit to get into. So that's how it works. But this article talked about the sacraments and went into all the, the Christian sacraments and then how they work in Thelema and the EGC. And what I found interesting is that, they said you have things just because something was in the old eon. Like, we have this intuition that things of the old eon are outdated, okay? Like, Christianity's view of homosexuality is outdated. Christianity's view of the role of the woman is outdated, right? Especially for fundamentalist Christians.
Yes.
Their view on abortion, their view on birth control is outdated. And we sort of have this intuition about it when we get past the dogma and the doctrine and so on and so forth, that their views are outdated. And it's because it's very old eon. And sin is very outdated. The idea of sin and the idea of sacrifice. We sort of have this knowledge, this innate intuition that all this stuff is outdated and that, churches are sort of stuck in the Middle Ages, so to speak. And so we sort of can easily lump in all of religion, sacraments and religious life and everything in with that. And I think we do so in error. And what this article said was that, just because something is of the old eon doesn't mean it can't be updated. So the idea of sacraments has actually been around for thousands of years, way before Christianity. It started in the times of Egypt and Babylon and Greece and all these old religions and cultures.
And even, Native Americans, they have certain, they wouldn't call them sacraments, but they have rites of passage.
All cultures have rites of passage. And, okay, baptism, I don't remember all the details. I will link the article. But baptism went back way before. I know it was a concept in Greece. It may have been in Babylon. I don't remember. But it's been a concept for millennia.
Oh, yeah.
Confirmation is basically the rite of passage at puberty, when you become an adult. And marriage is obviously, every culture has some sort of marriage ritual.
Oh, yeah.
Priests exist in pretty much every culture. Eucharist has been around, I think they pointed back to Egypt.
And in the mystery religions.
In the mystery religions, you have, these ancient mystery religions before the time of Christianity that had the idea of a Eucharist, that they were eating the body of God, basically, whether in a metaphorical or literal sense. But this existed for millennia. And of course, rites of death, whether before and after death, have existed in every culture. So all these different things have existed, these rites of passage, these sacraments. And so it's not strictly a Christian concept whatsoever. And, I've said before, and it's my true belief, and I've never found anything to the contrary, that there is nothing unique in Christianity. I said this about Wicca. It's true about Christianity about 100 times over. There is nothing unique in Christianity. Take any concept in Christianity, and you can find a similar concept, if not identical, in an older religion. Resurrection, death on the cross, even 12 apostles, baptism, Eucharist, all of these ideas have their roots in older cultures. They were just updated to the new eon of the time, from the eon of Isis to the eon of Osiris. Go back to episode 18 for more about eons, where we talked about all that stuff. So Christianity, basically in almost an ingenious way, took all these pagan concepts and basically constructed a whole new religion out of it.
Yeah.
Now, did Jesus actually exist? I have no idea. Some people don't think he existed at all. He may or may not have. If he existed, I doubt very strongly that his life looked anything like the Gospels claim.
Oh, yeah.
I really, 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 really doubt it.
I mean, look at Crowley.
Yeah.
And he was the most genius occultist.
Yeah.
And he had faults too.
Sure.
But his writings, I don't believe had faults.
No. So, there's nothing in Christianity that's original, in my opinion. And it's the same thing with the sacraments. They just took older rites of passage and put them into their own context, into the context of Christianity, into the church, and put a whole bunch of dogma around it. And that was it. So it's the religion we have a problem with, the specific religion, not religion in general, the specific version of how they did sacraments, not sacraments in general. So, people need religious guidance throughout their lives. So this is part of what I think I felt. Now, other people may not relate, I don't know, but I'm just going to say what I felt.
And I'm going to agree because this is how I grew up.
So, being in the New Age community for a very long time, from time to time I was attracted to Christianity. I think a lot of the reason was you have this sort of outline of life. You're born and you get baptized. You grow up and you get confirmed. You get married and you have a wedding in a church or whatever. Or you become a priest and you have holy orders. You receive the Eucharist and that's supposed to help your soul or whatever. And then you go to confession and confess your sins, and that's supposed to purify your soul.
Way out of order, by the way.
I don't really care. And then,
it bothers me.
Okay, confession goes with, I guess, Eucharist and stuff.
Confession's before Eucharist.
Yes, okay. Ex-Catholic. And then you are close to death, and the priest helps you with that transition. They are basically your guide. And I find it interesting. You had gods in Egypt, for example, who were the guides to the dead. And so the priests sort of played that role in Christianity.
Yeah.
So you have this whole outline where you're guided from one stage of life to another, to another, to another. And I often had this really probably silly thought when I was in the New Age, like, when I die, who's going to say my funeral? Like, I don't want a priest, but what's going to happen? I don't want it just to be a secular, totally non-religious, totally non-spiritual thing. How does that work? Who's going to say it? I mean, I would haunt whoever tried to get a priest to my funeral. How would that work? Or, when we got married. Now, we got married in the Methodist church I grew up in. So that, was taken care of. But if we were to do it later on, like, okay, where would I get married? I don't want just the justice of the peace or something. I don't want just a friend who registered to be a minister. Like, I want, like, Wicca has hand fastings. We thought about doing that. Like, I want some sort of ritual around my wedding. I don't want to just someone that says, yep, you're married now. Congratulations. Go have a party or something. It just didn't feel enough. And
we're thinking of redoing it.
Yeah, I think at a 10-year we're going to redo it in the EGC. But, okay, we thought about having children. And the thing was, before we found this, Eleonora said, well, granted I want them to be open-minded, but I also want them to have a structure. Like, what are they going to believe in? I don't know. I didn't have an answer to that, No,
you really didn't. And it wasn't a structure to necessarily be like, you have to do this.
No, not indoctrination.
No.
Just, this is the context you're in. This is, okay, you're born. And now baptism in the EGC, you have to be at least 11 years old, which is great. That's fine.
They do have a ceremony for when you're born, though, which is cool.
Yeah. So but some sort of structure, some sort of belief beyond attract what you think about or something like that. Okay, what myths do you tell your children? What do you tell them about the meaning of life and about the world and this sort of thing? Like, you need some sort of context for bringing up a child. You can't just, you could. There are lots of atheist parents, but I feel like you need some sort of outline, some sort of context, some sort of structure, some sort of mythology that you give to your children. And when I say mythology, I don't mean fake, I don't mean false, I just mean a story about divinity that you give to your children. You don't want to just talk about the universe or something. I just feel like that's missing something. And that's what I talk about, this mystery that was missing. So I felt like, being in the New Age, being just sort of on a spiritual path in general, was missing this whole structure that I think I intuited was necessary in some way. And so to find, and I think this is Crowley's genius, whether he meant to or not. I think he was guided from, another force, I'm sure. But for him to also intuit this and say, well, you know what? We're going to have kind of the EGC step in for Thelemites and play this role. Now, by no regard do all Thelemites go to Gnostic Mass or anything like that. It's not something that is like a required thing, but it's there for those who feel like they want it. And I think that's a really important thing. Because again, it's just, maybe no one else feels this way. I have no idea. But you get into spirituality, you get into the occult, you get into magic, and you sort of feel like, all right, well, what's the context? What do I do with this? What does this mean in a greater sense, in a greater context? What will this mean for my children? What do I bring them up in? How do I describe to people what I believe? Who's going to, when I'm on my deathbed, I know I'm 30 and thinking about this stuff, who's going to guide me through that process? And they have, usually it's a priestess, which I think is really cool, help you, and they take care of both practical and spiritual affairs, where they say, okay, well, are all your practical affairs in order? Like, do you have a will? Do you have, what's going to happen to your estate? All this kind of stuff. And then, answer any questions you have about whatever you're concerned about, what's coming next or whatnot. And, I often wondered again, okay, if I'm on my deathbed, what am I going to do? Like, religiously, what's going to happen? Right? No, I'm not talking about afterlife. I'm just talking about that transition, which is a really sensitive, for anyone, really sensitive thing. So I think to bring in this idea of a church, of sacraments, of rites of passage, really gives a context and a structure to life. And I think a lot of people, if they had felt this, wouldn't know how to put words to it, because I didn't. What was really missing? I searched for all sorts of different things, and there's not much out there that's similar. Like, some religions have, like I said, Wicca will have certain rituals. They'll have hand fastings for marriages. They'll have, I'm sure they have other things, but it's not as structured, or, there's not a specific outline. It's just sort of, it's a much looser organization.
And even like with hand fasting, because I have a friend that I guess wants to do it for her sister or something. Like, she wants to do the actual ceremony. And you have to become a minister first before you can, because it's not recognized as a ritual, as a ceremony.
Sure.
I don't know if it is in the...
I don't know.
But it would have to be, though.
Right.
For marriage or whatever. You probably have to be registered with the state. Well,
that's just for anyone. I think even priests probably do.
I don't know.
But yeah, it's a much looser thing. But it's something. So that's at least something. But I just, like I said, I never want to just go to a justice of the peace and then be like, yeah, you're married now and that's it. And congratulations and go on your way. It just felt... Now, I'm an informal person, but that's like too informal.
Yeah, it is. And I've been to ceremonies of the Justice of the Peace.
Yeah.
And they really tried to make it spiritual, the one I went to, but it wasn't the same.
No.
It just wasn't.
You can't generalize spirituality. That's I think the problem with the Unitarian Church is it's so general that you can't really say anything because you could offend someone. Like if you say too much, so you have to stay in this really good feeling, light and fluffy place. You can't really go too specific. I think that's the danger. You can't overgeneralize spirituality because it's a very personal, intimate thing.
Yes.
So, again, whether anyone else feels that way, I have no idea. I know I have, and I suspect that if you look at your experience of life, that it's probably there if you're not in some religious context already. So, like I said, I mean, other religions do have it outside of the traditional, like, Abrahamic religions, but I feel like it's much looser. And then Christianity, of course, and Islam, they have it, but it's connected with guilt and sin and all this old eon stuff that you don't want. So, is there any new eon context? I think really the fullest version of that is in Thelema. I haven't really seen, I mean, I've been around the block a fair number of times religiously. I haven't really seen anything comparable, and that's just, if someone feels like they don't need that, then great. But I know for me, it fulfilled something that I couldn't previously put words to. And I suspect it's like that for a lot of people. So religion is, I think, that structure that gives meaning to people's lives, that gives an outline, that gives guidance from one part of life to another, to another, to another for people, And I think in Thelema, they do a really good job of not telling you how to live your life, because it's do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, but also still having a really beautiful religious ritual.
Yeah.
So it's a really good balance.
Yeah.
They don't have the doctrine. They don't tell you what to believe or things like that. It's just sort of a really beautiful ritual. And, connected with other ceremonies if you want those, like baptism and so on and so forth. So not something I would have expected. And a lot of people, again, might not relate at all. They might think you've gone off the deep end. But for me, it's something that I've thought a good deal about and done a lot of searching to try to find what satisfied that need for mystery. And along the way, I think learned a lot about what really works, for me at least, and why it's so necessary. So, that's really all I have about that. But I hope we can be open-minded about this concept, because I know it's really easy to hear religion and then scoff at it and just move on. But like I said, I suspect that if you really look deeply, and I don't judge either way. This is not like some sort of do this or, you'll suffer sort of. I don't care. It's just, for me, this is how it was. And I think for other people, I suspect that it may be the case that if you look deeply, there is some sort of deeper longing for mystery. Now, whatever form that takes for you is whatever form it takes for you, and that's your own exploration. But I think that just going after desires and feeling good and that's it, is insufficient. It
feels cheap.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people who just do that, and I don't know if they feel that way. But for me, it's not enough. And I do think that's important. I do think that you deserve to have what you want if it's your true will. But there's something else too. And that's all I'm saying about it. So hopefully this made sense to you, and I'd really love to hear your thoughts about this one.
Yes, please comment.
So you can see the show notes and start a discussion over at darkascent.org/DA019. And again, we'd love to hear your thoughts about this whole concept, because I think it's very different than anything we've really discussed in the past, so I would really be interested. But sit with this idea, see what it does for you, and let us know what you think. So we thank you for listening. If you want to subscribe to our podcast, you can do so on iTunes or other places where you can find podcasts. So that would be awesome. And we are here now every 2 weeks. So we will return 2 weeks from now. I'm not going to try to figure out what date that is. I'm lying, yes I am. I want to say the 21st. Yeah, that should be it. So,
Is it?
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, June 21st. So we will see you on June 21st for another episode of the Dark Ascent podcast. Thanks for listening, everyone. And I hope you have a great 2 weeks. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Love is the law. Love under will.